Good evening, my little creatures of the night. Mr. Wendigo back again. And boy, have I got a tale that'll leave you frozen with fear tonight. Let's see what the ice has whispered to me this time. Yes, here we are. Calson Bay, Alaska, where the harbor lights flicker like dying stars and the fog comes off the water with a memory all its own. Now, the Yupik and Inuit peoples of coastal Alaska know better than to speak of certain things carved from bone and hunger, monsters that should have died with their makers, but didn't. Reed McCready is about to learn what happens when you answer to your name in the fog. He's the harbor watchman in a dying town, making rounds through empty slips where boats used to live. But something's been listening to the water, calling out. This is your late night creature feature. When the fog calls your name, don't answer. It might not be asking. Before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from tonight? Alone in your room? Driving through empty roads? Somewhere the fog rolls in thick? Drop a comment and let me know. I like knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Now then, let's talk about the things that learn to be human by wearing us. Harbor of the Dead. Chapter 1. The Frozen Shore. The harbor lights of Calson Bay were down to 3 bulbs and a stubborn string of Christmas LEDs someone forgot to take down 2 winters ago. Reed McCready made his rounds with a dented thermos and coffee that tasted like pennies. The tide was low. The mudflats sat there like open wounds crusted with frost, and the boats in their slips looked like gravestones with ropes for epitaphs. He'd been harbor watchman for 18 months. Before that, he'd been a fisherman. Before that, he'd been a man who slept without counting the hours till dawn. The council called it harbor security. Reed called it what it was. They paid him $400 a week to make sure the boats that weren't coming back still had someone checking their lines. Most of the fleet had gone south or been sold for parts. His own boat, the Bryce Ann, named for his brother, he dismantled over 2 years like a man field dressing his own heart. First the radar dome. Then the pots, all 60 of them, sold to a Kodiak crew for $3,000. Then the engine block. Then the nameplate, which he'd unscrewed drunk one night and kept in his coat pocket for a month before throwing it in the bay because keeping it felt worse than letting it go. Bryce drowned 12 winters back, 32 years old, fishing solo in a squall their father said was fishable if you weren't a coward. The Bryce Ann came back. Bryce didn't. They found him 3 days later, washed up on the rocks near Spruce Cape, face down, 1 boot missing. Reed identified the body. Their father stayed home and drank himself into something that looked like grief but moved like rage. Reed stopped at Slip B12 where his boat used to live. Empty now, just water and barnacles and the memory of better math. He sipped the coffee, tasted like rust. Should have sold it whole, he said to nobody. The wind off the bay didn't disagree. His radio crackled. Maureen from the council. Reed, you copy? He thumbed the toggle. Yeah, Maureen. Making rounds? That's the job. Lights out on Beefinger again. Breakers are being temperamental. Don't go fixing them tonight. Storm's coming and I don't need you electrocuted on my paperwork. Wouldn't dream of making your life harder. You're a prince. Also, Thad Elgin's dog went missing last night. Latch on the kennel was open. Thad swears he locked it. Reed frowned. Wolf? That's what I said. Thad says wolves don't open latches. I told him wolves don't need to if the latch is shit, but he's insisting something came for the dog specifically. Dogs show up? Not yet. Keep an eye out. Mutt answers to Bingo. Looks like a mop had sex with a mistake. Reed almost smiled. I'll watch for him. Good man. Stay warm. Maureen out. The radio popped into silence. Reed clicked his headlamp off and let his eyes adjust. Out here, light felt like lying. The dark told older stories. The fog moved like thought. It came off the water in coils, pale and patient, folding itself around the pilings until Reed couldn't tell where sea ended and air began. He'd grown up in this fog. His grandfather said it had moods. His father said his grandfather was a superstitious old bastard. Reed figured both men were right. A gull lifted from the rock break, flapped twice, and gave up. Reed watched it glide. Smart bird. He turned toward the mooring fingers. The Christmas LEDs blinked red, blue, painting the empty slips. He was halfway down B finger when he heard his name. Reed. He stopped. The voice came from the fog, soft, familiar in a way that made his stomach drop. Reed, you left the light. Bryce's voice, his brother's voice, from the year before the fight started and the boat came back alone. Reed's hand found the piling beside him and held on. Bryce is dead, he said to the fog. The fog didn't answer. The wind did, carrying something under it, a smell like wet leather, like a sealskin left too long on a rack. The lamp on B finger sputtered and went out. Reed stood very still. He counted his breaths. Got to 5 before his radio hissed again. Reed? Maureen? You still there? Yeah. Breakers just tripped the whole beeline. Leave it. I'm serious. Wasn't planning to touch it. Good. Get inside. Weather's turning and I don't trust it. Copy. The radio went quiet. Reed clicked his headlamp back on and swept the beam across the water. Nothing. Just fog and the gentle slap of waves and the smell that shouldn't be there. He turned toward Seafinger. That's when he saw it. Something lying across the planks at the far end, past the junction where the walkway met the pier. A tarp, maybe, or a net, but tarps didn't lie that still. Reed crossed the distance careful. He'd learned Seafinger's bad boards the first week there was a dip near the middle that'd swallow your ankle. He stepped over it without looking. The fog peeled back, just enough, just long enough. It was a face. Half a face, stretched like hide over driftwood, the right side hairline to jaw. The eye was open, filmed white. A line of sinew along the cheekbone had been pulled tight and tacked with a thin piece of bone. Whalebone, maybe. The work was neat, reverent. Reed didn't move. Every instinct in him wanted to cover it, kick it into the water, do something. But superstition is just knowing what not to touch, and his grandfather's voice was loud in his skull. Leave what the sea leaves. He stepped back, slow, one boot, then the other. When he had a piling between himself and the thing, he let his breath out. Reed, the fog said again. Not Bryce this time. His mother's voice, if his mother had climbed out of her grave without warmth. Don't stay out. You'll catch your death. His headlamp flickered. He clicked it off, then on. The face was still there. The fog was closer. Something in the mist moved. Not wind, not current. It moved like it was learning how to be solid. Reed backed down Seafinger without turning around. When he reached the junction, he risked a look back. The face was gone. Just planks, wet with fog. The smell remained. He went back to the harbor shed, grabbed a blue tarp and a handful of zip ties, and returned to Seafinger like a man who'd forgotten how to make smart choices. When he got there, the plank was bare. Only a smear of something dark along the grain. Reed bent and touched it with his glove. It clung, came away with a smell that made his stomach turn. Not rot, something between living and not. Behind him, boots on the planks, light, quick, careful. He straightened without turning. You shouldn't be down here. I could say the same. The voice was real this time, human, warmed by breath. Evelyn Frost, the weather tech from the outstation half a mile up the bluff. She stepped into the edge of his headlamp with her hood pulled low and her cheeks red from cold. Station anemometer's been catching voices. Thought it was a harmonic in the bearings. It isn't. Evelyn wasn't from here. That helped. Locals pretended they knew the names of things and then shut up when those things started answering back. Outsiders asked questions. She held up a small digital recorder, its red light blinking. Want to hear your mother? Don't, Reed said. Then hear mine. She died in Duluth. Never saw this water. Evelyn clicked a button. Wind first, then the thin wheeze of a bearing, then a voice so ordinary it made Reed's skin crawl, asking if someone had remembered the pie in the oven. The word pie stretched too long. Evelyn clicked it off. I found a face, Reed said. Right here. Half a face, stretched and pinned. It's gone now. She didn't ask if he was sure. She crouched, lamp painting low light along the planks, and sniffed. Smell that? Yeah. My equipment's been recording the same frequency band we get when humpbacks are close in, but it's not whale song. It sits between human breath and something the software won't label. It's not a ghost, Reed. She stood. It's a thing with lungs. And memory. He nodded, not because he understood the science, but because the shape of her words fit the shape of his dread. I heard Bryce, he said, and my ma. Evelyn's eyes softened. You aren't the only one. Jack Tripp followed his daughter's voice down to the riprap by the fuel dock 2 nights ago. Never came back. I found drag marks. If we call the troopers, they'll take 3 hours and show up with 2 guys and a clipboard. We don't have 3 hours. You think it's a person, Reed said, wearing faces. I think something here knows we answer to names, she said, and to love. They walked the pier together without touching. At Beefinger's end, she knelt, ran gloved fingers along the salt line, and came up with a pale thread stuck to the wood. A fine hair, white as baleen, slick with something that made it cling to itself. She pocketed it in a plastic vial. Upshore? Reed asked. Evelyn nodded. The worst of the voices come off the flats by the creek mouth. We go now. We can beat the tide. The path past the cannery felt like walking through a mouth someone had forgotten to close. The buildings hunched in the fog with their windows blacked, and Reed swore the glass in one of them breathed. They crossed the culvert over the creek. The sound below was deliberate, like someone trying not to wake a child while they dragged the riverbed out of place. At the mouth, the flats sat wide and slick, eelgrass combed by low tide. Their lamps caught plastic buoys and barnacled pallets half buried in silt. Farther out, the fog was denser, white layered over white. Reed, a woman's voice said. Not Evelyn. The vowel stretched thin. Reed, I'm cold. Evelyn raised the recorder without looking around. Don't answer. Her voice was soft. It learns the shape of your reply. Something moved at the edge of lamp range, something low, then tall, then low again, like a man learning to stand. The eelgrass lay down wherever it drifted, then lifted after it passed. Reed's right hand found the old harpoon gun they kept on the shed wall. He'd brought it out of superstition. His left hand counted each notch in the grip. Do you see it? Evelyn asked. I see where it isn't, he said. The fog is careful around it. The shape came wrong, too many elbows, and those elbows a little too far under the skin. It wore something over its shoulders that could have been hides, could have been clothing. What it wore on its head was worse, the suggestion of a face, not a mask, a face as garment, the eyes slack, the lips held by pins of bone. It walked like Reed's brother for 3 steps, then it walked like Reed. The fog leaned with it. Reed, it said in his mother's voice, then his own, and then something that split the difference. Don't leave the light. Evelyn's hand found his sleeve and squeezed. If you shoot, he will not kill it. He will only take a skin away and make it want yours more. Then what? He asked. We salt it, she said. We make it try to wear something that burns. She opened her jacket. Inside, on a climbing sling, were 4 canvas bags tied tight. She handed him one. It smelled like the creek mouth on a bright day when the seals rolled in kelp. It smelled like ice that hadn't known fire yet. Salt and ash, she said, mixed with powdered kelp and whale oil. My grandmother's grandmother would have known the ratios. Mine wrote them down and forgot to tell me the part where this is a good idea. The creature came closer. Under the mask of skin, Reed saw eyes like tide pools at night, a shine that didn't reflect lamp but remembered it. The face it wore slipped, jawlines sagged, the pins tugged. With a shy motion that carried heartbreak, the thing raised a hand and pressed the cheek back into place. Reed stepped forward before he knew his body had decided. Evelyn's nails bit his sleeve. He didn't stop. He raised the canvas bag and tore the top with his teeth, and the smell came out sharp. The thing flinched. "Reed," it said, and this time the voice wasn't quite right. It had lost the roundness. "Ree." He threw. The bag struck its chest and broke, and the white dust lifted and billowed. Where it touched the skin, wetness beaded. Where it found the edges of the face, it smoked faintly. Not flame, but a drying more profound than heat. The lips pinched. The eyes did not blink. The thing shook itself like a dog ridding water that wasn't water. It hissed, not with mouth, but with everything it wore. The eelgrass around its ankles lay down and stayed. For a heartbeat, Reed saw through the garment and into the arrangement of bone underneath long, jointed, obedient to someone else's idea of how a person might move. Then the fog folded back over. "Again," Evelyn said. "We mark it so the land knows it." They threw together the remaining bags. The dust clung and seared. The face slipped lower now, off one cheekbone entirely, revealing something underneath wet and patient. The thing withdrew a step, then another, and the fog made room. It moved along the flats toward the creek mouth with a gait that got the walking more right the farther it went. Before it reached the culvert shadow, it turned once, head cocked, and wore Reed's stance exactly. Then it entered the dark, and the culvert breathed deeper to receive it. Evelyn let her shoulders drop. "We didn't kill it." "No. We told it our names." He nodded, and it told us it knows what a door is. They walked back toward the harbor without talking. Reed counted the breaths between the foghorn moans. At the cannery corner, a dog trotted out of the fog, the Elgin mutt, tail tucked, ears pasted. It skidded to a stop at Reed's boots and stared up, not recognizing him or pretending not to. He knelt and let it smell his hand. Its nose wrinkled, pulled back from the salt. It sneezed. That made him laugh, and the laugh made the fog settle in his ribs. At slip B12, the Christmas LEDs flickered back on, red, blue, across empty slips. Reed clicked his lamp off and stood in the weak color, feeling tired in a way coffee couldn't touch. He looked at Evelyn. She looked back, the recorder light winking at her collar. "Tomorrow," she said, "I'll show you what the spectrogram did when you threw the salt." "Tomorrow it might have my face," he said. "Then I'll bring mirrors," she said, and managed a smile that didn't ask for one back. Reed watched her walk up the bluff path until the fog swallowed her boots. When the harbor was only water and lamp and a dog that wasn't sure whether to belong, he leaned on the piling and let the tide teach the dock to breathe. Somewhere under the culvert, something wore a face and practiced vowels. When the wind turned, it brought the smell again, wet leather and salt carried on a voice he would have given anything never to hear again. "Reed," it said, right behind him, and for 3 breaths he did not turn around. Chapter 2. The Hollowed Ones. Morning had the color of old bone. The clouds sat low, and the sea didn't bother with the horizon. Reed's radio came back to life in a huff of static. Maureen wanting a report, wanting a phrase she could put on a notice. He told her the breakers needed checking, and Jack Tripp hadn't come home. He did not say the culvert breathed people-shaped air. Evelyn waited at the station trailer with a laptop humming on battery and her hair jammed under a cap. She'd slept, if she had, like a soldier in a trench. "Look," she said. The screen showed a spectrogram. Reed had never loved pictures much. This one he could tolerate. Human voice sits here. Whale song here. Wind mostly down here. Last night, she drew a gloved finger along a band where the colors tangled. We got all 3 at once. Stacked. The human vowel rides the wind. The whale carries it. Something in the middle binds them. It learned our voices, Reed said. It wore them, she corrected. The vowels are right, the words aren't. It knows sounds like a seal, knows a fish by its shadow. He shrugged. I know what it did to a face. She closed the laptop. The creek mouth feeds into a seal hunter's shack 2 miles inland. He doesn't live there anymore. Nobody does. The radio picked the worst of the voices from that direction before they started riding the culvert downhill. If there's evidence, it'll be there. Reed checked the harpoon gun without comment. He found in himself the small courage of men who keep showing up after forgetting why. We go now, he said. The dog, Bingo, apparently trotted ahead like it wanted to find a reason to turn back and couldn't. The snow and the alders lifted and fell on their sleeves without melting. The world had chosen a temperature and planned to keep it. The shack sat on piles leaning like drunk knees. Nets hung from the eaves, stiff as laws. The door had a skin nailed over it, not seal, not bear, something else. Evelyn put her hand to the hide and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were just as brown as before, but something small in them had decided it could break if it needed to. Inside, the smell was careful. Blood old enough to be sweet, salt that had learned to be furniture. They moved through in lamps and silence. On the wall, where a seal hunter might have dried skins, hung faces stretched over wood frames, 3 of them, mouths pinned shut with bone, eyes open at ceiling mold. On the table, bones had been arranged into a family shape, long bones for parents, small for children, a ring of finger bones making a wreath. Evelyn recorded everything, every breath, every step. The dog whined once at the door and then pressed himself under the table, trembling. Listen, she said. Reed did. The shack had a heartbeat, wood flexing, salt weeping, the creek talking under the floor. And from the back room, through a thin wall, came a sound like someone whispering the alphabet with a mouthful of kelp. Evelyn went first. Reed wanted to be angry about that. He let her be brave instead. The back room had shelves for jars and jars for fat gone rancid 50 years ago. The jars were empty now. The shelf was not. On it lay a garment made of faces sewn edge to edge, eye to eye, mouth to mouth, the seams neat as hymns. Reed's stomach climbed his throat. He forced it down with a swallow that clicked. Don't touch it, Evelyn said. If it learns your hand, it learns the way you reach for things. The whispering stopped. The dog's whine sucked back into his lungs and stayed there. Reed felt the hair on his forearms rise. The window went dim. The door to the front room creaked, not wind. Something forgetting how hinges worked. Back, Reed said, and they moved as one, heel toe, in the way people do when told by some older part of their body that now would be a good time to be an animal. The front room met them halfway with a shadow standing where they had not left one. It was tall and wrong in a way that takes your brain seconds to articulate. During those seconds, it owns you. Reed, it said in Evelyn's voice, then in Maureen's, then in a man he had not met. Don't leave the light, he finished, because if it was going to steal, it could steal everything. Evelyn did not raise the recorder. She raised the salt. The bag broke and dust lifted and curtained. Where it touched the garment on the wall, the faces tightened and drew back from the stitching, lips cracking. Where it touched the thing in the doorway, the shape leaned out of itself, then pressed back in with malice and good manners. Go, Reed said. They didn't run. Running would have taught it something useful. They walked in a parody of calm, the dog backing through their legs with his belly to the boards. The thing followed, letting them know it could pass them if it wanted, that the mercy was its idea. At the threshold, Reed turned and met the eyes. If you come to the harbor, he said, and didn't recognize his own voice because fear had dried it to salt, I will take your skins away in front of whoever you love. It smiled. Of course it did. They crossed the yard with dignity they had not earned. At the alder line, Evelyn's radio chirped. A voice came through Bryce's again, this time saying don't forget the pie, with the word pie held 3 breaths long. Evelyn shut it off with her thumb. Above them, the light shifted. Reed looked at the creek, at the culvert mouth downstream, at the eelgrass lifting and settling. He thought of names, of how easily they unwrap from a person if you pull with the right touch. He said, "We need to salt the harbor, the slips, the culvert, the breakers, everything that breathes." Evelyn nodded. "And fire, not to burn it, to make it move wrong." They made the harbor by noon, the sky a seamless bruise. Reed and Evelyn moved along the slips with canvas bags of salt, ash, kelp, dusting thresholds, breaker box seams, winch housings, the shed sill where Jack Tripp's boot prints stopped mid-sentence. The dog kept pace, nose down, growl lodged too deep for sound. Across the flats, voices threaded the fog, not words at first, just the shape of words. Then the shape learned itself. Reed, from a throat too young to belong to anyone alive. Evelyn, from a mouth that loved her once and lived 3,000 miles away. Evelyn's recorder pulsed red. "It's testing resonance," she said, "finding what opens us." They salted the culvert last. Reed slit the final bag and let the dust pour into the black breath. The fog convulsed. For a heartbeat, the culvert stopped breathing, and he felt the absence the way you feel a room when the refrigerator motor clicks off. Then the breath resumed, a fraction slower. "See," Evelyn whispered, "we can teach it to mispronounce." They were halfway across Beefinger when Reed saw it. A shape at the fuel dock, crouched low. At first he thought it was driftwood. Then it moved, straightened, and Reed's throat closed. Jack Tripp. He stood at the edge of the dock, swaying slightly. His flannel shirt hung open. His face was wrong tilted at an angle that didn't match his shoulders, like someone had put it on crooked and hadn't bothered to adjust. His mouth opened and closed without sound, practicing. "Jack," Reed called. The thing wearing Jack turned. Its eyes caught the light and held it too long. The mouth found a shape and tried it out. "Reed," it said in Jack's voice, then in a child's voice, Jack's daughter, maybe. "Reed, help!" Evelyn grabbed Reed's arm. "That's not him." "I know." But knowing didn't help. The thing stepped forward, and the planks under it groaned. Jack's face slipped, the jawline sagging, and the thing raised a hand to press it back into place with a tenderness that made Reed sick. "Daddy's cold," it said in the little girl's voice. "Daddy needs to come home." Reed raised the harpoon gun. His hand shook. "Where's Jack?" The thing cocked its head. "Here," it said, and patted its own chest. The sound was wet, here and here and here. It touched its face, its throat, its belly, like showing off new clothes. "Jesus Christ," Evelyn whispered. The thing smiled with Jack's mouth. Then it moved, fast, so fucking fast, faster than anything that big should move. It closed the distance in 3 long strides, joints bending wrong, arms too long. Reed fired. The harpoon punched through its shoulder and stuck. The thing looked down at the shaft, curious. It reached up with one hand and pulled. The barbed head tore free with a sound like wet canvas ripping, and black blood welled from the wound thick as tar. The thing dropped the harpoon on the planks and kept coming. "Run!" Reed yelled. They ran. The dog bolted ahead, a blur of brown. Behind them, the thing that wore Jack laughed, a chorus of voices layered over each other. Men and women and children, all laughing at once in perfect harmony. They made it to the shed and slammed the door. Reed threw the bolt and dragged a toolbox in front of it. Evelyn grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall and held it like a club. The dog wedged himself under the workbench, eyes rolling white. For 10 seconds, nothing. Then the door shook, once, hard enough to crack the frame. "Reed," the thing said from outside, Jack's voice, then Bryce's, then his mother's. "Don't leave the light. Don't leave. Don't." The voices overlapped, braided together, rising and falling like a song. Reed looked at Evelyn. Her face was pale, lips pressed thin. "We need to move," he said. "The shack. We need to get to that elder you mentioned, the one who knows the old stories." "Samuel Icknick," Evelyn said. "Lives up past the church. He's Yupik. Came down from the north 20 years ago. He'll know what this is. If anyone does." Another blow on the door. The toolbox scraped an inch. The dog whimpered. Reed looked around the shed. There was a back window, small, high up, big enough for Evelyn, maybe big enough for him if he didn't mind losing skin. "Go," he said. "I'll keep it busy." "The hell you will," Evelyn said. "We go together or we're both fucked." He almost smiled. Almost. "Fine, window, now?" He boosted her up first, hands on her waist as she scrambled through. The dog went next. Reed grabbed him by the scruff and shoved him through the opening into Evelyn's waiting arms. Then Reed pulled himself up, felt the frame bite into his ribs, and squeezed. Behind him, the door splintered. He kicked his legs, felt Evelyn's hands grab his coat, and then he was through falling into snow and gravel and gasping like he'd been underwater. They ran without looking back. The fog swallowed them whole. Samuel Icknick's house sat at the edge of town where the road gave up and turned into tundra. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and purposeful. Reed pounded on the door with a fist that felt like it belonged to someone else. The man who answered was old in a way that made age irrelevant. His face was carved from decades of wind and his eyes were black and sharp as obsidian. He looked at Reed, then at Evelyn, then at the dog, and said, "You've met it." "Not a question," Reed nodded. Samuel stepped aside. "Come in. Don't bring the cold." The inside of the house was warm and smelled like wood smoke and seal oil and something herbal Reed couldn't name. Samuel gestured to a worn couch. They sat. The dog curled at Reed's feet and finally stopped shaking. Samuel poured them tea from a dented kettle. He didn't ask questions. He waited. Reed told him, the faces, the voices, Jack Tripp, the thing in the fog that wore people like clothes. When Reed finished, Samuel was quiet for a long time. He stared into his tea, and Reed wondered if the old man had fallen asleep with his eyes open. Then Samuel spoke. "Tupilaq," he said. The word sat heavy in the air. "My grandmother's people knew of them. They were made things, carved from bone and sinew and hate. A shaman could make one send it to kill an enemy. But this," he shook his head, "this is something that learned to make itself." "How do we kill it?" Evelyn asked. Samuel looked at her. "You don't. You can't kill what was never alive, not in the way you understand life." "Then what do we do?" "You unmake it. You take away what it's learned. Faces, names, voices. You strip it down until it's just bone and hunger again. Then you burn the bone. You scatter the ash where the sea and the land meet, and you don't speak its name for a generation." Reed leaned forward. "How do we take away what it's learned?" Samuel stood and walked to a shelf. He pulled down a bundle wrapped in sealskin and untied it carefully. Inside were small carved figures, ivory and bone, faces worked into the surface with delicate precision. "These are Tupilaq, the ones my grandmother's mother made to protect, not to harm. You use them to trap the other. You make it see itself, make it confused about which face is real." He handed one to Reed. It was small, fit in his palm, and the face carved into it was generic, could be anyone, could be no one. You place these at the thresholds, doorways, culverts, places where things cross. The Tupilaq will see them and think they're mirrors. It'll try to wear them, and when it does, it'll forget which skin is which. "And then?" Reed asked. "Then you burn it with driftwood and whale oil, the old way, fire that knows the sea." Evelyn leaned forward. "What's it doing with the faces it takes? Why does it need them?" Samuel's expression darkened. The Tupilaq was made to be a tool, a weapon, but this one has been alone too long. It's forgotten what it was made for. Now it just wants to be something. Anything. It collects faces like a child collects shells, trying to understand what it means to be real. Reed felt something twist in his gut. Almost pity. Almost. Where did it come from? Someone made it, Samuel said. Long time ago. Maybe 100 years. Maybe more. Someone carved it and sent it to kill. But the target died some other way, or the maker died before calling it back, so it stayed, waiting, learning. It lived in the ice, in the deep places where the seals go. And then something woke it up, maybe the warming, maybe just time. It came back hungry. It's got Jack Tripp, Reed said. Is he still in there? Can we? No, Samuel said, and his voice was gentle. Jack is gone. What it wears is just memory, skin and voice, and nothing else. The man is dead, has been since it took him. Reed looked at the floor, felt the weight of that settle. There's more, Samuel said quietly. The Tupilaq doesn't just take faces. It takes the death too, the last moment. When it wears someone, it lives their dying over and over. That's what it feeds on, the fear, the ending. That's why it keeps the faces, not to be them, to taste their fear again and again. Evelyn set her tea down with a hand that shook. Jesus. Samuel looked at them both. You've marked it with salt. That's good. That slows it, makes it cautious. But it'll come for you now. You've heard it, confused it. It'll want your faces more than any others. So we set the trap, Reed said. We use these. He held up the carved figure. Yes, and you lure it somewhere it can't escape, somewhere between sea and land. The ice, maybe, where the plates meet. It'll be weak there, confused. The boundary will hold it long enough for the fire to do its work. Reed thought of the shore ice, the rotten plates, the seam where the thing had nearly pulled him under. I know the place, he said. Samuel nodded. He wrapped the bundle of carved Tupilaq and handed it to Reed. Go at dusk, the in-between time. It'll be strongest then, but also most vulnerable. It lives in transitions. That's when you can trap it. They stood to leave. At the door, Samuel touched Reed's arm. The faces it wears, he said. They'll try to stop you. They'll sound like your brother, your mother, people you loved. Don't listen. The Tupilaq doesn't understand love. It only knows hunger. When it speaks with their voices, it's just trying on sounds. Reed nodded. Thank you. Samuel's grip tightened. And when you burn it, don't look at the smoke. Sometimes the things that come out of the fire are worse than what goes in. They left with a bundle of carvings and a gallon jug of whale oil Samuel pressed into Evelyn's hands. The dog followed close, and Reed realized he'd stopped thinking of him as Bingo, just dog now. That felt right. The fog was thicker as they walked back toward the harbor. Reed could hear the thing before he saw it, the wet sound of something dragging across planks, the chorus of voices humming a song that had no melody. It's hunting, Evelyn whispered. Let it, Reed said. We've got work to do. They spent the next 2 hours placing the carved Tupilaq at every threshold they could find, the shed door, the culvert mouth, the junction where Beefinger met the main dock. Each time Reed set one down, he felt a small shift in the air like a door closing somewhere he couldn't see. By the time they finished, dusk was bleeding into the sky. The fog turned gold, then orange, then the color of old bruises. Reed stood at the edge of the shore ice and looked out at the plates. The seam where they'd fought the thing was visible, a dark line of open water running crooked through the white. You ready? Evelyn asked. Reed checked the harpoon gun. Loaded. He had 3 more heads in his coat pocket and a flare gun on his belt. Evelyn had the whale oil and a road flare that burned hot enough to melt steel. No, Reed said, but let's do it anyway. They stepped onto the ice together. Chapter 3, Where the Ice Breaks. The ice sang under their boots. Small sounds, tinks and creaks like the world tuning an instrument it didn't know how to play. Reed led with a harpoon gun across his chest, stepping careful where the plates met. The seam ran dark and crooked, water moving underneath with a patient hunger. Behind them, the fog closed. Ahead, it opened just enough to show the way forward. Reed didn't trust that kindness. "It's watching," Evelyn said. "Yeah." The dog whined but kept pace, staying between them like he'd been trained for this his whole life. Maybe he had. Maybe some part of every animal knows what lives in the margins. They reached the center of the plate where the ice was thickest. Reed set the jug of whale oil down and unscrewed the cap. The smell rose sharp, ancient and oily, and wrong in a way that made his nose itch. Evelyn pulled out the road flare and tested the striker. It hissed, sparked, but didn't catch. "Come on," she muttered, and tried again. This time it caught. The flare burned red and angry, painting their shadows long across the ice. "Reed," a voice called from the fog. "Bryce," clear as day. "Reed, where are you? I'm cold." Reed's chest tightened. He forced himself to breathe. "Not real," he said. "Reed, please. I can't find the boat. I can't find my way back." Evelyn touched his arm. "Don't answer." "I know." But knowing didn't make it easier. The voice came again, closer now, and with it the sound of boots on ice, uneven, stumbling, like someone who'd been in the water too long. The fog peeled back. Jack Tripp stood 20 feet away. He looked almost right. Almost. His flannel shirt hung open, exposing a chest that moved wrong, breathing in places that shouldn't breathe. His face was Jack's, but the eyes were too wet, too dark, like they'd been dipped in oil. His mouth opened and he smiled, and the smile went too wide, splitting at the corners. "Reed," Jack said in his own voice, then in his daughter's voice, "Daddy's here. Daddy came back." Reed raised the harpoon gun. "You're not Jack." "I am," it said, and touched its own face like proving a point. "I'm everyone. I'm you, too, Reed. I'm Bryce. I'm your ma. I'm everyone who went into the water and didn't come back." It stepped forward. The ice under it didn't crack. It knew how to walk here now. "Jack died 3 days ago," Evelyn said, voice shaking but steady enough. "You took him at the fuel dock. You wore him down to the riprap and you pulled him under." The thing cocked its head. "Yes," it said, and the honesty was worse than a lie. He tasted like diesel and tobacco and fear. So much fear. He called for his daughter, over and over. "Emily, Emily, Emily." It laughed Jack's laugh, then the little girl's giggle, then something else entirely. I wear him best when I remember that part. Reed's finger found the trigger. "Where's his body?" "Here," the thing said, and patted its chest. And here, it touched its throat. And here, it ran a hand down its belly. "I keep the best parts. The rest I gave to the crabs." Reed fired. The harpoon punched through Jack's chest and stuck. The thing looked down, curious. It reached up with both hands and pulled. The barbed head came free with a wet sound, and black blood welled from the wound thick as tar, smelling like low tide and rot. It dropped the harpoon and kept coming. "Again," Evelyn yelled. Reed reloaded, hands shaking. The second shot took it in the shoulder, the third in the gut. Each time the thing just looked down, pulled the shaft free, and kept walking. The wounds didn't bleed much, didn't slow it down. It was 10 feet away now, close enough that Reed could see the seams where Jack's face had been stitched on thin white lines like surgical scars running along the jawline, the hairline, around the eyes. "I'll wear you next," it said in Reed's own voice. "I'll wear you and go see Maureen. I'll make my rounds. I'll drink coffee that tastes like rust. I'll be you better than you ever were." Reed stepped back. His boot hit the edge of the seam and he felt the ice flex. "Evelyn, the oil." She grabbed the jug and threw. It hit the thing's chest and burst, whale oil splashing across Jack's stolen face, soaking into the flannel shirt. The thing stopped, looked down, touched the oil with one finger and brought it to its mouth. "Tastes like memory," it said. Evelyn threw the flare. It hit the thing's chest and the oil caught. Flame spread fast blue at first, then orange, then white hot. The thing screamed, not with Jack's voice. Not with any voice Reed had ever heard. It was the sound of something that had never been allowed to scream before, something that had forgotten it had a throat. Jack's face blackened and peeled. Underneath was something pale and smooth, not bone, not flesh, something carved. The thing stumbled backward, clawing at itself, trying to shed the burning skin. Its hands caught fire. Its hair went up like dried grass. It fell to its knees. Reed watched. He wanted to look away. Couldn't. The thing reached up with burning hands and tore Jack's face off in one clean motion. The skin came away like a mask, pins and all, and underneath was a skull that wasn't quite a skull, elongated, smooth, with a single horn rising from the forehead, not an antler, a horn. Spiraled like a narwhal's tusk, but made of bone that looked carved, deliberate. The thing opened its mouth wide, too wide, and let out every voice it had ever stolen. Reed heard Bryce, his mother, Jack, the little girl. Dozens more, layered and screaming, all pouring out of that mouth like smoke. Then it looked at Reed with eyes that were just holes, just darkness, and it spoke one last time in a voice that was all of them and none of them. "I just wanted to be real." The ice cracked. The thing fell through, not fast, slow, like the water was pulling it down gently, like a mother putting a child to bed. The flames hissed and died. The voices stopped. The seam closed with a soft sound like a sigh. For 10 long seconds, nothing moved. Then the ice groaned, a deep, low note that Reed felt in his chest. The plate under them shifted. "Run," he said. They ran. The dog bolted ahead, ears flat. Behind them, the ice sang its breaking song, cracks spider-webbing out from the seam, plates grinding against each other, water surging up through the gaps. Reed grabbed Evelyn's hand and pulled her toward the shore. His boots slipped. He caught himself, kept moving. The fog tried to help, tried to show them the way, or maybe it was just done with them. They hit solid ground at the rock break and didn't stop. They ran past the cannery, past the culvert that breathed quieter now, past the harbor shed with its salt-dusted threshold. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs gave out and they collapsed in the gravel lot by Maureen's truck. The dog lay between them, panting, tail thumping once against the ground like saying, "We made it." Reed looked at the harbor. The fog was lifting. The Christmas LEDs blinked their stupid red-blue pattern. Everything looked normal, empty, quiet. "Is it dead?" Evelyn asked. Reed didn't answer right away. He thought about the thing's last words. "I just wanted to be real." He thought about Jack Tripp calling for his daughter. He thought about Bryce and the boat and names that unwrap too easily. "I don't know," he said finally, "but we took its faces. We burned what it learned. Maybe that's enough." Evelyn sat up, pulled her knees to her chest. "Samuel said don't speak its name for a generation. Then we won't." They sat there until the cold made them move. Reed's radio crackled. Maureen, sounding annoyed. "Reed, you copy? Where the hell are you? Got a report of gunshots down by the ice." He thumbed the toggle. "Making rounds?" he said. "Everything's fine." "Fine, my ass. Get back here and fill out an incident report." "Copy." The radio died. Reed looked at Evelyn. She looked back, and something passed between them, not understanding. Exactly. More like shared weight. The kind you carry together or not at all. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Coffee sounds good." Epilogue. The council called it a winter incident and blamed stress, isolation, and the fog that makes people see things. The troopers came, took notes, found nothing, and left with faces that said they'd heard stranger. Jack Tripp was officially listed as missing, presumed drowned. They found his truck at the harbor, found his coat on the fuel dock, found nothing else. His daughter Emily placed flowers at the water's edge every Sunday for a month, then stopped coming. People do that. They stop. Reed kept making rounds. He salted thresholds when the fog came in. The dog he never did call him Bingo decided to stay. Slept under the workbench in the shed and followed Reed everywhere like a shadow with bad breath and no sense of personal space. Evelyn shipped samples to a lab in Anchorage. Whale oil residue, ash, a fragment of carved bone she'd found on the ice the next morning. The lab sent back results that said inconclusive and possible contamination and recommend further study. She filed the report in a folder labeled Winter 2024 and didn't open it again. The voices stopped, mostly. Sometimes, late at night when the wind came off the water just right, Reed heard his name, just once. Soft, like someone testing if he'd answer. He never did. 3 weeks later, Evelyn's recorder picked up something new. Not a voice, a sound low frequency, almost subsonic. It sat in the band where whales sing and ice breaks, and the earth remembers how to be old. On the spectrogram, it looked like breathing. She showed Reed. He looked at the pattern in, out, and said, "Could be machinery." "Could be," she agreed. Neither of them believed it. In spring, when the ice rotted all the way through and the harbor smelled of thaw and diesel and small hopes, Reed walked the flats at low tide. The eelgrass lay flat, parted by something he couldn't see. On a rock at the creek mouth, he found a carving, small, palm-sized, made of bone, a face, generic, could be anyone. Could be no one. He picked it up, turned it over. On the back, scratched in careful lines, were words in a language he didn't know. He brought it to Samuel. The old man looked at it for a long time. Then he wrapped it in sealskin and put it in a box with the others. "It's still learning," Samuel said quietly. "Maybe it always will be." "Should we?" "No, leave it. As long as it's carving, it's not taking. Let it remember what it was supposed to be." Reed nodded. He didn't ask what happens if it forgets again. That night, he dreamed of the ice, of the thing falling through, flames dying, voices stopping. He dreamed of its eyes just holes, just darkness and the way it looked at him before the water took it. I just wanted to be real. He woke with the taste of salt in his mouth and the sound of something breathing under the floorboards. The dog lifted his head, listened, then put it back down and went to sleep. Reed did not. Outside, the culvert breathed, in and out, learning, folklore note. The Tupilaq is a creature from Greenlandic Inuit mythology, a constructed monster made by a shaman or angakuk from animal parts, bones, and other materials, then brought to life through ritual to attack an enemy. Traditionally, if the intended victim had stronger spiritual power, the Tupilaq could be turned back on its creator. These revenge figures were kept secret. To speak of making one was taboo. In some traditions, the Tupilaq was carved from various materials, including bone, sinew, and even human parts, then cast into the sea to hunt its target. The creature would take on life and grow as it absorbed the spiritual energy around it, becoming more dangerous the longer it existed. The Yupik and Inuit peoples of coastal Alaska have similar traditions of carved figures imbued with power, used for both protection and harm. The belief that objects could be given life through the right rituals, the right words, and the right intention was common across Arctic cultures. The polar bear holds special significance in Arctic mythology, powerful, intelligent, and capable of walking upright like a human. Some traditions hold that polar bears were once human, or that they understand human speech. A creature that blends polar bear and human form represents a violation of natural boundaries, something that has crossed a line it shouldn't have. The use of salt, ash, and fire as purification methods appears across many cultures. Salt preserves, but also purifies. Ash represents what fire has already claimed. Together, they mark boundaries that spiritual entities cannot easily cross. The practice of not speaking a dangerous spirit's name for a generation, allowing it to be forgotten, appears in multiple traditions as a way of weakening its hold on the living world. Memory feeds these things. Silence starves them. In coastal Alaska, where the line between sea and land shifts with every tide, where fog makes the familiar strange, and where winter darkness lasts for months, these old stories still carry weight. The ancestors knew things. They knew the ice remembers. They knew some hungers can't be satisfied. They knew that the loneliest things are the ones that learn to wear our faces. And they knew better than to answer when something calls your name from the fog. Well, boys and ghouls, that wraps up another terrorific tale from the vault. Poor old Reed. Boo-hoo. Did all he could do. Ah, so sad. Too bad. Burned the monster. Salted the thresholds. But some things keep learning. Some things carve themselves new faces when the old ones turn to ash. And the ice always remembers. And the ice fucked him up. Just how we like. If this story crawled under your skin the right way, hit that subscribe button. New creature features drop every day, and trust me, tomorrow's even nastier. Leave a like if you're checking the fog tonight, and drop a comment where are you watching from. What cryptid haunts your neck of the woods? Have you ever heard something call your name in the dark and really known you shouldn't answer? I'm always hunting for the next nightmare. Remember, the fog carries voices for a reason. Not all of them belong to the living. Some things wear faces because they forgot what it means to have their own. And some hungers learn faster than we do. Until next time, kiddies, keep your fires burning and your eyes on the trees. This has been your Late Night Creature Feature. I'm Mr. Wendigo, and the ice is always watching.